Can I increase the value of my property in a day if I've got a commercial property? Stay tuned to hear. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Morning Minute. Myself, Michael, Bergio, and James. We're going to be talking about if I own a commercial property, can I increase the value in a day? Is it possible? James, how are you?
Good, Michael. Good morning. How are you?
Good. Now, sort of before we get into if you can or can't, I thought I'd just sort of brief everyone on how a commercial property is valued. Just give you a bit of a brief on that. And there's really two ways a commercial property is valued. You've got the rate all worked out. You've got the rate per square meter, but then you've also got the yield. And what that basically means is the percentage of return against the value of the property. So quite often, rate per square meter is if a shop is worth 10,000 a square meter, you're at 100 square meters, 10,000 times 100 equals $1 million. But then, so that's you quite often, you always look at that figure, but it's more prominent when a shop is vacant. Then you have it from a lot of investors like a property that has a tenant in place, a lease in place, and there's someone paying rent. And then they like to look at it as a yield, return on investment. If I buy this property for $1 million, how much rent will I get? What's the yield? So for example, if $1 million property is 50 grand a year rent, that's a 5% return. A lot of people will weigh that up against the market, what a lot of properties are selling at, but they also look at their bottom line. If they're borrowing money at 3% and they're getting a 5% return, they're making 2%. Obviously, they would always like more. If they borrow it, they would like to get a higher return and lease and have a lower interest rate. And that's where it's so prominent with rates that people are paying and what they can buy in. So, for example, if the rent is $80,000 a year at a 5% return, it's $1.6 million. So, to answer the question, can you double the property in value? Yes, in theory, but most often, and more of a practical, we see a 20 and 30% increase from a vacant shop to when it's rented. Because James, a lot of owners are sort of pretty firm on their rental amount, aren't they? When we're showing a property, sometimes you can see it empty for 6 months, and people think, why don't they just rent it, take any offer? Why do you think so? Why is that?
Look, it comes down to what their plans are with the property, I suppose. If it's something that they're planning on holding for a very, very long time, and maybe they've got no mortgage on it, maybe then it doesn't matter so much and you can put someone in just to get it ticking over. But some people might be using it not for the sense of flipping the property, but for holding it, putting a tenant in there, and then trying to make a little bit of extra return on placing a really good tenant. So we were having a little conversation about this morning, Michael, and it comes down to a lot of factors, comes down to your mortgage, comes down to cash flow. But, you know, based on the topic, I was wondering, you don't get that sort of, you don't work on a yield in residential. Why is it only in commercial? And why don't more savvy investors use this little tool when you can pick up a vacant possession property and potentially put a tenant in there and massively increase the value of it? So it's a consideration, and wondering why don't more savvy investors do that?
Yeah, and it's a good question, and it's true. And over the years, I've had so many examples where I've sold a vacant property, we've then leased the property, and then the owners got a new valuation or sold it for 20, 30, 40% more, regardless of the market. Like a lot of time residential, you sort of, if the market goes up or down, that's what you sell at. But commercial, you've got this ability where you can increase the value of the property with the lease deal you do. And as you made a good point there, depending on the owner's point, like what they want to do in their property plans. Like James, whenever we have an owner who is holding it. They got no plans on selling. They're a lot more negotiable on the rent sometimes, aren't they?
Yeah.
And then
for sure. And we're finding.
Yep, go on.
Sorry.
There's a bit of
delay here. No, I was just going to say, we've certainly found that we've found that, especially through COVID, it's been an interesting time in the commercial marketplace, and I think a trend that we definitely found is transactions have been happening when there has been a tenant in place. There's very rarely been vacant possession properties selling. There have been a couple, but generally they're for the purposes of an owner-occupier, not for an investor. So again, it comes down to the plans in which the purchaser is looking at, or what the owner has with the property. So it's quite an interesting one where there's that potential to make money on it if you have the ability to hold, if you know the game a little bit, I suppose. If you've got good agents that can find you tenants, it's a really interesting one. You don't think, why don't more people do it? When if you have a little bit of understanding, it looks like there's a good amount of money that could be made there in a fairly short amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. Like we've got one going on in Howard Ave at the moment. Owner was going to take it. It's been on the market for a year. It's empty. They had an offer accepted at $730,000. We've just located a tenant paying $58,000 a year, and we'll sell it for $900,000. Like they were literally the day going to exchange on that property when I found that tenant, and now they're going to be selling it for 200 maybe 50 grand more with the tenant. So, and it's a good question. Why don't people do it? And my response to James was, a lot of people don't understand how it can happen. It's almost when you talk about it, they think it's taboo. They think someone's getting rorted. Something's wrong. It sounds too good to be true. A lot of people, when they think of property, buy and hold, it's time in the market. You can't really do much. Yeah, you can paint it and do some things like that. They're used to that residential model, but commercial is very different. I think that's why I really like residential as well, because if you've got a good agent, a great agent, you can really make your clients money. And the tenants are happy because they've got a property. It's just how it is. But the factors that stop an owner doing, a potential buyer doing it is, Luke said it, fear, the unknown, but also the financial, where if you think about any property you buy, anyone's bought a property, you most of the time you're borrowing 80%, 90%, 70% of the property. Think of your own circumstances. Could you have bought that property and had it empty for a year? And if the answer is yes, then maybe you can look at this option. If the answer is no, wow, that would put a lot of pressure on me, not only having it empty for a year, but paying all the outgoings. And that's really what it comes down to. You can find a great, like every property rents. It may take 3 months, it may take 6 months, it may take 12 months. Some of the best properties I've seen, some taking the longest time, and some that I thought were less desirable, rented quicker. There's no forecasting it. You can analyze it all you want. Yes, you can pick key things near a bus stop, all that stuff. But James, like Carlisle, that would be the best shop in DY with what people give you parameters to buy, and it's been empty for a year. And all the other ones rented a lot faster. Like you just sometimes cannot pick it, but you've got to look at yourself and go, well, a good option, what you could do, you may be able to get a loan for $1 million property, but maybe look at buying a $500,000 property or a $300,000 property with mostly cash, and buy it vacant, because a vacant property is so much more negotiable, we see in the marketplace. And then you rent it, like even little ones we've rented in, James, how about Narbang Way? We had one, like tell us about, we had two in there, one leased quickly and one took a bit of time. Go through just, that.
Again, just 2 vacant possession properties, just offices, I think just under 60 square meters and just over 70 square meters. Owners are both in different situations. One's just holding on, banking on it, increasing in the future, gaining some value. Look, there's not a lot to say on that one, to be honest. It's an interesting one because
it's just more the time it got rented. One
has slightly different 2 months. Yeah, and there's basically no difference in the suite. It's all the same aside from the difference of 12 to 15 square meters. And I think we thought there'd be a lot more movement from the city and different places into sort of more, I wouldn't call Belrose urban, but into more of a suburban area where there is commercial properties, offices staying vacant. You think there'd be more activity, but really it hasn't picked up. So you can never really pick how long it's going to take to find a tenant, as you say. But it all comes back down to your intentions.
Yeah, like it's the same market, one leased in basically a month and one's taken 6-7 months. You just can't pick it. And that's why a lot of people don't look at vacant properties. And that's why there's such a extra price if there's a tenant in place compared to vacant. But there is this disconnect. Buy the same property vacant for 300 grand, you buy it tenanted for 450. It's 150 grand there that can be made in 1 month, 1 day. You sign that lease, the value's up basically. Or you could be holding it for 9 months, 1 year empty. And that's really that disconnect of why a lot of people don't do it. And they're not, it's commercial property. Out of like 1,000 agents on the Northern Beaches, there's 5 of us, or maybe 10 of us, but only really 4 of us who do volume. So for a buyer to have that confidence in what you're hearing, you're not really going to have it. So there's that sort of market there. But so
the example you used earlier, Burge. Yeah, just quickly, the example you used earlier of the car lot. Great investment in the end for the owner, buying that property off the plan. It was vacant it still is vacant at the moment, but the lease is all being negotiated at the moment. Finding an international tenant, you certainly can't forecast that as part of your plans when you purchase a property. But how much is that going to increase the value of her suite at 701 as soon as that tenant gets in there?
500 grand. Good example. Yeah. So the lease we found, it's not as high as we would have liked, but we got a national tenant. And they bought for 145, and now it's going to be worth over 2 million. So empty for a year, a long lease. Yeah. And the other example is the other one in there. It's next to the barber shop, and then the other guys. One rented basically a month after leasing it. One was empty for nearly 2 years. So if you're a buyer looking at a floor plan, you go, well, do I pick shop A or shop B? Coleroy, 4 shops, 3 of them leased before the building was built. One's been empty for nearly 3 years. That's where a lot of people get scared and they don't look at it. But if you sort of take that punt, you could almost double your shop. We've seen it. So, there's a bit of a commercial investment overview. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Luke, Ray, good to have you on. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, guys.